You know, I love theory crafting. I love just working up different theories and stuff like that. I try not to read other theories because I'd like to come up with my own, but in this day and age, it's kind of unavoidable. So the basis behind what we're going to talk about here is predicated on a theory that was not thought up by me. I want to specify that. I don't really steal other people's theories, but it was not thought up by me. Instead, it was thought up by a combination of, I assume, Reddit users. I read it in an article. One of the things that some of you guys pointed out is that Lady Loki in the TV show is not actually Lady Loki, right? Based on the end credits of the Spanish version of the Loki TV show, that it's basically Sylvia, or some people are calling her Enchantress. That's fine. If it's Enchantress, that's cool. I don't really think it makes much of a difference. I mean, Enchantress was never really interesting to me. In a lot of ways, she was kind of like the Asgardian version of Aphrodite from the Greek mythology, especially when you go and you look at like Marvel Ruins, where she basically became like an adult film star. But it's one of those things where it's like, I mean, it's cool, right? It doesn't really drive a lot of interest in my book. But what is really cool is that there's a theory floating out there that this chick, right, Sylvia, Lady Loki, Enchantress, whatever you want to call her, we'll use her name interchangeably over the course of the video, that she is a variant but was formerly a member of the Time Variance Authority. That's a cool theory. So then I started thinking about that, right? I was like, what if that really is the case? Like, what if she really is a former member of the TVA? One of the things that this theory explains is why it is that she knows the tactics and strategies of the TVA, how it is she's able to get around, circumvent, how she can use reset chargers, that she looks like a member of the TVA who basically went rogue. But the question for that is, why? Why would a member of the TVA go rogue and then launch a bunch of reset chargers into the time stream with the intention of spawning a whole litany of alternate realities? Let's take a break from Loki for a second and let's go look at Marvel Comics. And let's talk about a group called the Exiles. So the Exiles were a really, really cool concept in terms of how they were created. The idea is that you had a group called the Time Brokers, or the Time Breakers, whatever you want to call them. The whole point was that the multiverse was kind of on this brink of collapse, and a group needed to be formed that could kind of fix these different universes. The reality is a really thin plot, but it basically gave us some cool stories where you saw this kind of multiversal team that was composed of different members from alternate universes. And the roster would change all the time, right? It would shift up all the time. So you would have one story arc where you might have like the X-Man Wolverine from an alternate reality, and then like he might die. So then he'll be replaced with like Magneto from a different reality, and just all that kind of stuff, right? Just kind of going on and on and on and on and on. But nonetheless, one of the cool things that goes on here is that when it comes to the Exiles, their main enemy was a guy by the name of Hyperion. Now, I do want to say I don't think Hyperion is going to have a role in Loki, but the whole gist behind this is Hyperion was a member of the team and it actually duped them at the same time because they were taking their orders at one point by a guy called the Time Broker. Not really sure who he was until you found out that it was basically Hyperion. So they were heroes who were going on these exceedingly dangerous missions, getting their orders from a future version of a guy who basically led to the destruction of all life on his own Earth. And so because of that, it introduced this notion of a heroic team doing bad things, not realizing that they're doing bad things because they don't know the person giving them their orders is a bad guy. They think they're just doing what they're supposed to be doing, which kind of makes sense, right? I mean, how extensive could any one person's knowledge of every reality in an infinitely expanding multiverse possibly be? And so the more I started thinking about that, the more I was like, okay, let's apply that to Lady Loki, Enchantress, Sylvia, whatever. Let's apply that to her character, and let's see if we can't extrapolate this out. So if we know that she's a rogue agent, then the question becomes what led her to becoming a rogue agent? Well, let's look at the TVA for a second. Another theory floating around out there is that TVA agents are basically variants from alternate universes. I'm not entirely sure I agree with that, just because of the fact that there's so many TVA agents out there, the amount of time and effort needed to grab all those people from alternate realities, bring them in, and then as the theory states, wipe their minds, give them new memories, convince them that the timekeepers are right, and then have them reach their current form would be colossal, right? That's a massive undertaking unless you have giant groups of people who are doing it. I don't know exactly what's going on with the TVA. I will say, I think they're largely just created, right? They're just kind of made and they exist and that's really it. I think the TVA is exactly what you see. I don't really think there's a whole lot of mystery and intrigue going on there, but it does kind of ask questions about like Owen Wilson's character and his level love of a jet ski. One of the things that theory had postulated was that because Owen Wilson loves jet skis, which is uncharacteristic for a TVA agent, that in turn he was at one point a variant who had something to do with jet skis. I don't know, maybe he was a jet ski salesman. And that when his mind was wiped and he was positioned in the TVA and then told, you've always been here, that over time, those memories are basically starting to come back, and they're coming back in the form of his love of particular things, which will ultimately coalesce in him realizing who he was and how it all works. But wrapping back around to this, assuming that the TVA are just kind of created and there really isn't a whole lot going on there, that still kind of begs the question of what's going on with this Lady Loki Enchantress chick. Here's my thought on this, and I want to run this by you and see what you all think. So let's say that we look at this animation that was given to Loki by Miss Minutes, which looked sus already, and it's predicated on the actions of the timekeepers, who seem pretty suspicious because, like Screen Rant pointed out in their tweets and in their various articles, that for a group that has such a fine-tuned control or direction that the universe needs to go in, you never see them. And like any authority figure, you would think they would be out there dictating what needs to happen, telling people how stuff has to unfold. Instead, all you get is the judge. The judge is, I operate on their behalf. I basically give instructions to the TVA based on what it is that they want to have done. I mean, maybe they're sending her messages by way of carrier pigeons. I have no idea. But the important thing is she supposedly does what the timekeepers tell her to, and that's all we really get here. But let's say that's not the case. Let's say that one of two possibilities is going on here. One, the timekeepers are dead, right? They've been dead for a long, long time. The multiversal war that happened, which I believe actually did take place, saw the timekeepers ultimately destroyed and defeated. And the victor of the multiversal war has been pretending the timekeepers was actually alive, putting forward this narrative that the timekeepers destroyed whoever this victor happens to be. And now the timekeepers are the ones that are quote unquote giving orders, when in reality, it's that bad guy, that particular victor. In this instance, I'd say maybe Immortus, an alternate reality persona of Kang the Conqueror. I don't really know. We know we're gonna see Kang in Ant-Man 3. He's rumored to be in Loki, but I'm just kind of using the victor as just kind of some ambiguous name of whoever that person happens to be. No real definition there. But the important thing is he's secretly or she's secretly operating behind the scenes, pulling the strings, and nobody in the TVA knows. The TVA believes they're getting their orders from the timekeepers, and much like the judge stated, the timekeepers are exceedingly busy trying to make sure the timeline stays intact, which makes sense. That's no easy task, right? It's not a red button that you push every 10 minutes. It takes a lot of work to kind of keep that stuff going. The other alternative here is that the timekeepers were the ones who started the multiversal war, that the multiverse was really just a whole bunch of universes that all existed in harmony with each other. Or maybe there was some kind of conflict between universes, but that's just the natural order of things, that universes die and universes are born, and that's just the cycle of how the multiverse functions. But the timekeepers wanted control. The timekeepers wanted to be the ones to run the show. They wanted to be this kind of absolute authority. Maybe they were narcissists, maybe they believe they should just have that rightful role, whatever their logic happened to be. And so they ultimately incited a war or started going through and conquering all these different universes. And that the multiversal war was not a war between the timekeepers and somebody like Kang the Conqueror. Instead, it was a war between the timekeepers and those who were resisting being conquered. Whole realities that were actually fighting back against them in the same way that like the Rebel Alliance fought the Empire in Star Wars. The timekeepers ultimately proved to be successful. They overcame that rebel faction or those universes, and they basically wiped them all out of existence using some kind of doomsday weapon, or maybe that's why they developed reset chargers or something along those lines. And then now the timekeepers are the ones running the show. But regardless of what situation we go with, what scenario, whether it's a war between the timekeepers and Kang, or it's just the timekeepers conquering the multiverse, that this character, Lady Loki, Enchantress, what have you, figured out what was going on. She realized what was actually happening here, that the timekeepers are bad guys, or the timekeepers are not alive, and there's some guy running behind the scenes that's controlling everything. But regardless, she's doing what she can to basically take pot shots and defeat them. That in reality, she's a good guy. And that's one of the things that looks kind of weird, because the only thing that we really know about her is what the TVA has told Loki, and by extension, told us. It's a variant version of Loki that's going across the multiverse and killing different members of the TVA and stealing their reset chargers. But if you look at the situation for what it is, it doesn't look as though this individual takes satisfaction in killing the members of the TVA. I wouldn't go as far as to say that she's crying over it or begging them to like just let her take the reset chargers, but the goal is the reset charger. And we know the TVA won't give that up without a fight, right? We saw that in the initial conflict with Loki when he was trying to get his hands on a reset charger, trying to control his time caller, So it's one of those things where they keep that under lock and key. The only way to get it is to actually kill them and then take it. But regardless, it may be one of these things where because she's basically a good guy, she's trying to undo everything, or she's trying to bring the multiverse back, create what are in effect allies, and then in turn get rid of whoever this person happens to be that's running the TVA secretly, whether it's the timekeepers themselves who are lying to everybody in the TVA, or some mysterious figure who's operating behind the scenes. And that we'll learn as time goes on, not everything's what it seems. I don't think the TVA are really allies in this. I don't really think the TVA, the judge, is secretly working alongside this enemy, and that in turn she's going to receive some increased level of power, whatever the case happens to be. I think the TVA really has no idea what's going on, and the TVA is just following orders. It could also be the judge really is the one behind the scenes pulling the strings, right? I mean, none of us suspected Agatha Harkness, and it turned out to be her in WandaVision. That would be the simplest thing, that the judge is just conning everybody. But this also presents a lot of other possibilities. Say, for example, this Lady Loki Enchantress chick survives, that because she's a good guy, she doesn't die. She allies herself with Loki, then they end up pairing up with Doctor Strange during Multiverse of Madness, because as a lot of you guys seem to have pointed out, her actions in the Loki TV show may very well give birth to the Multiverse of Madness that we see in Doctor Strange 2. And so if you have Lady Loki, and then you've got Loki, and then you've got Doctor Strange, now you got a team. And so there's a lot of possibilities that you can do with these particular things. And so if that's the case, that segues perfectly into Doctor Strange 2. It gives us that plot. I don't really know how Wanda would tie into it. It may be one of these things where it's just people taking completely separate avenues that all kind of end up in the same place. That Wanda has nothing to do with the Time Variance Authority or the Timekeepers or potentially the secret individual who's operating behind the scenes controlling the TVA. Instead, she's just on a mission for her kids, and that the voices of her kids that she heard, which was most likely manipulation by somebody else, is just them trying to get out of whatever prison they happen to be in because the multiverse is in such a state of disarray, and it's the perfect time to do it. But they all sort of coalesce into seemingly the same place, right? Two different paths that lead us to the same location. Maybe that's exactly what's going on with this whole thing. I know there's a desire, especially on my behalf, to kind of link all this stuff together because the Marvel Cinematic Universe is based off that. Captain America's shield appearing in Iron Man, Thor's hammer showing up in New Mexico, all these little bitty Easter eggs that we've seen over the course of the MCU, especially with their movies, that kind of tie them all together so everything comes together in a more uniform way when we get the Avengers film. I don't know if that's really what's going on here in the TV show. It'd be kind of cool if it did, but regardless, but let me know what you guys think down in the comments section, and let me know your theories. I would love to hear those. If I end up doing a video on one, I will certainly give you credit. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.